Okay guys, how are you all? I am not at school today, so we are gonna do a little video of me giving what we would have done in class. Lucky you guys. So at this time, there is paper in the front of the classroom. I want you to go grab a blank piece of paper. Pause me when you have done before you go do this. Okay, I'm back now. So what we're going to talk about are the Crusades, as I already said. So last class, we briefly talked about what was the goal. The goal of the Crusades was to take over the Holy Lands. What is the Holy Lands? Jerusalem. Jerusalem today is still a critical place in the world for religion, for holy pilgrimages. It is still a very, very important place for people to go. So let's talk about why and the events that happened about 1,000 years ago. Okay, so these are all of the events that we will talk about today, and you will include in a comic strip. Okay? So at this time, with your blank piece of paper, I want you to fold it into 8 squares and put these little numbers on it. See these little numbers? And you're gonna leave a blank spot for the title, and you are gonna draw a picture and I'll have a caption for every one of our slides. These vocabulary words right here, you will use in your slides, okay? You will use all of these in your slides. So you need to have all of these crossed off before the end of this PowerPoint, okay? So if you're not ready, pause it. So if you see these little square things up here, these will have numbers in them. These numbers should relate to each number on the piece of paper that you are writing a picture for. If this, the reason I'm having you do this by yourself on your own computer is because you can pause the video if you need to look at anything a little bit more closely. Okay, here we go. First, by the way, the last thing I guess I'll say, okay, this is an example, title, picture, and some captions to go along with it to explain what's going on. Okay, so first one, you see slide 1, this is the first thing. Okay, the last thing I'll say is for every one of your comics, for each number, there are 2 slides. The reason the writing will be the same on both slides, but the pictures will be different. And this will be on every single slide. So cross these off as you go through it, as you use these in your comic strips. Okay? Hope everyone's good. So let's start. As we've already talked about this year, in the beginning of the 600s, Prophet Muhammad united much of Arabia behind a new religion called Islam. The followers are, as we talked about many times already, are Muslims. So because of the immense trade networks available to the Muslims in this region of the world, the religion spread very, very quickly to the Middle East and especially to North Africa and parts of Southern Europe up here. Remember how quickly Islam really spread, okay? So, this is the method of spreading the religion for the most part, okay? So what we're gonna do right now is we are gonna watch this video in 1 second. If I can figure out how to pause this. Actually, so what you're gonna do is you are gonna pause me right now after I explain this to you, and you're gonna go to Moodle and you're gonna click on video 1. In video 1, you are gonna watch. After you watch video 1, come back to me, okay? So pause me now and go do this. Okay, now I'm back. So here we go. Next slide. Okay. So, comic strip number 2nd square. Alexis I ruled the Byzantine Empire from about 1088 to about 1118. This was, as we've already talked about, the eastern half of the Roman Empire. And it thrived after the fall of Rome. We've talked about this a lot already this year. So Alexis appealed to the allies in the West, such as the Pope, to come help fight the Muslim Turks who were threatening his territories. So at this time, the Muslims controlled all of North Africa, and they had started to kind of come in on all of what is modern-day Turkey. So Constantinople's right here. So the Byzantine Empire at this time was actually pretty small. The Turks had come very, very close to Constantinople. Alexis was scared that they were going to they were going to break through the walls of Constantinople, and they were just going to actually plummet and just destroy the whole city. So he said, hey, I need some help. So he said, Christians in the Roman part of the empire, come help me. Please, please, please. So this is Alexis saying, Christians in Europe, I need some help. Okay, make your comic. Go. Okay, next slide. So, Pope Urban II, so Pope means it has to be the Roman part, so the western half of the Roman Empire, calls a meeting of church leaders and nobles in France. This is the Council of Clermont. Very, very famous. So, here the Pope discussed the need to aid the Christians of the Byzantine Empire as they were threatened by expanding Muslim powers in Eastern Europe. The Pope also mentioned the Holy Lands being occupied by Muslims and offered forgiveness of sins for those who would go on a pilgrimage to reclaim it. So, the Pope is basically doing a call to all Christians in the western half and saying, come, we need to fight off the Muslims in Jerusalem. We need to get them out of Jerusalem. Why did the Pope do this? What's the rationale? Yes, Jerusalem is the birthplace of Jesus, which is very important. The other real reason is Christians believed that they had to control Jerusalem in order for anyone else to, basically for a reappearance of saviors or anyone else to reappear, they would come from Jerusalem. So they needed to control this area. So Council of Clermont. So this is a depiction of what that meeting might have looked like. Okay. So this is comic 3. Okay. Moving on to comic 4. So the first crusade takes Jerusalem. So in terms of taking Jerusalem, the crusade was successful. So the Christians successfully took over Jerusalem in the first crusade. Okay, in total there was about 9 crusades. Over 150 to 200 years they took place. So in the first crusade, we talked about in last class, the immense, almost 2,000-mile journey from Paris all the way down to Jerusalem. It took 3 years of men walking over land. Only about half of the men actually made it to Jerusalem that originally set off from Paris. Half. Okay? The city walls were breached and the siege towers made from boat wood, and the residents within the city, Muslims, Christians, and Jews, were all massacred at this time. They didn't basically care who it was. But now, the Christians held Jerusalem by themselves. So, war's over, we're done, right? First crusade, everything's over, right? No. This is just the start of things. This is just the start. We have a lot longer to go. So, now, let's watch a quick little video of what this might have looked like, okay?
One of the most fascinating episodes of the Middle Ages. One can argue that no other event would have as much of an impact on European and Middle Eastern history for hundreds of years. What is just as fascinating is that the First Crusade was even conceived and started and then managed to achieve its goal of conquering Jerusalem in 1099. Historians argue about the origins of the Crusades, but most understand that many factors culminated in motivating tens of thousands of Europeans to march across the continent and to the Holy Land. The 11th century would see a resurgence in Christianity in Western Europe, and in particular the rise of the papacy into a major political power. Even before the launch of the First Crusade, Europeans were waging what would be called a holy war, or at least using the ideology of defending Christendom as the reason behind their attacks in places in Spain, Italy, and North Africa. Many medieval warriors saw fighting heathens, usually Muslims, as preferable to fighting their fellow Christians, although there was plenty of that happening too. When Urban II was elected Pope in 1088, he received messages from the Byzantine Emperor Alexius I asking for troops to help him fight the Seljuk Turks. Alexius was looking for mercenaries, but Pope Urban had a different idea. He saw this as his opportunity to rally his fellow Christians to undertake a major military campaign to the eastern Mediterranean. At the same time, reports were coming from the Holy Land that Christian pilgrims were being attacked and kept away from the city of Jerusalem, the final earthly home of Jesus Christ. After months of traveling through Western Europe, where Urban was laying the groundwork for his project, the Pope arrived at the Council of Clermont in November of 1095, where he called upon the people to undertake a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, with the goal of retaking Jerusalem for the Catholic Church. As he said, "Let those who are accustomed to wage private wars wastefully against believers go forth against the infidels." Furthermore, the Pope promised spiritual benefits to those who would set forth on this pilgrimage. Remission of sins will be granted for those going hither if they end shackled life either on land or in crossing the sea or in struggling against the heathen. This was essentially a promise that if you died on this journey, you would be immediately granted access into heaven, which was a powerful motivator for a deeply faithful people. The Pope's call to grow in crusade was met with much more enthusiasm than he expected. Tens of thousands of people took the cross, and not just the rulers and knights who could afford the costly journey. Thousands of poor Christians, rallied by charismatic preachers like Peter the Hermit, also left their homes and villages to cross Europe. Some may have been motivated by the lure of riches from the east.
Okay, hope you enjoyed that video. Here we go. Comic strip number 5. So, Muslims unite behind their leader Saladin. So Saladin is a huge, huge name. He is a Muslim leader. Okay, so Saladin stands above the rest as the greatest Muslim military leader of the Crusades. He captured and united regions around the Holy Land, such as modern-day Syria and Palestine. He defeated Crusade armies and was highly respected by friends and enemies. So, let's take a quick look at who he really was. Good pictures for you? Okay, so now please go to go to Moodle and click on video number 2 and watch this video and then come back to me. Okay, so pause my video and go watch this video. Okay, go. Okay, so slide number 6. King Richard of England was known as, comic strip number 6. So King Richard of England was known as Richard the Lionheart and led the Third Crusade. So we're kind of jumping right to the third. The third is really, really important. The second, doesn't really matter. He was similar in status to Saladin. In fact, the two were both notable for military excellence and... Okay, so... as you can see how they depict Richard the Lionheart. Think of what your slide might look like here. Okay, so in the end, Muslims remain in control of the Holy Land. So basically, you have just the Holy Lands basically being recaptured and taken away from each other back and forth. They keep going back and forth from one controlling it to the other controlling it. So in the Second Crusade, the Christians lost the Holy Lands. In the Third Crusade, the Muslims basically maintain the Holy Lands and are able to push off the Christians. So this is basically a considerable just round robin of controlling the Holy Lands. So although the Pope called the recapture of the Holy Lands in 1096, there were in fact at least 9 separate crusades spanning over 150 years. There were times when Christians reclaimed the city of Jerusalem and surrounded Palestine, and there were times when Muslims' armies did. In the end, the region was controlled by Muslims, just as it had started. So 150 years, thousands and thousands of people dying, and then in the end, the Muslims still controlled the Holy Lands. But the Holy Lands did go back and forth, and they still have gone back and forth over time. So, this should all be familiar to all of you. This is, yes, Dome of Rock. You got it right. Okay, so today, last comic strip. Okay, I have a bunch of class. I have a class 1 getting here very badly. So today, the Holy Lands remain the subject of a lot of attention. Jews moved back into Palestine to establish the state of Israel after World War II, pushing mostly Muslim Palestinians to the West Bank. So this is the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Western Christian nations largely supported Israel when they warned the 6 Arab nations in 1948, and many continue to be allied with Israel today. Okay, so this is your last comic strip. Please put this in the box when you are finished writing it. Okay guys, hope you enjoyed this. I will see you all on Monday. Make sure your outlines are done. Goodbye.